I'm going to have to talk to marketing because there used to be a clip of a Patriots defender getting burned in the end zone by the Eagles. So not happy that wasn't in there. It blew my whole opening. So really great to be here with everybody this morning. I think what I'm going to talk about is a great follow-on to what you heard from Ian and from Ashu already this morning. For us, obviously, very complex business. Entertainment is a huge part of what we do, which means from a customer expectation perspective, if you think your customers believe and want you to be in the digital space and for that experience to be great, customers expect that from a company that provides this sort of service to them, right? And we haven't always delivered on that. And we've been on this journey to not only improve the overall customer experience, but we believe a huge part of that is improving the digital experience. How many of you are using NPS out there to measure satisfaction? Okay, number of hands. So we are a big NPS shop. We measure it at the relationship level. We measure it at the transaction level. So if you hear me say TNPS, that's what that means. We also measure it at the product level, both with customer-facing products and with employee-facing products. Ashu talked about 84% of our agents don't feel like they're dissatisfied with the tools that we put in front of them. I'm going to talk a lot about that. We found that to be spot on when we started measuring product NPS on our desktop interface and the different tools that we put in front of agents. So what you're going to hear from me is really kind of two key things. One, why are we so focused on the digital experience? Well, everything that Ian and Ashu said, helps explain that if you were wondering. I'm guessing you're not, but a lot of great evidence for why it's important. But what we've seen is as we transition the same customer to the same agent, but move them from voice to a digital channel, we get transactional NPS scores of 20 to 30 points higher. Same agent, same contact center, same customer, same training, same tools, nothing different. Simply by enabling that customer to use the digital channel, they opt in, they choose it, huge increase. Where else are you going to get an NPS lift of anywhere near that, right? There aren't that many places left if you've been focused on the experience. So that's kind of the big why. The key to everything I'm going to talk about for the next 25 minutes or so is really around integration. And Ashu talked about this, and one of the reasons that we chose eGain essentially eGain is our chat and messaging platform for the residential care business, so billing, repair, any type of support that you need. One of the reasons we chose eGain is because as we look at our ecosystem and the partners that we have, we want to make sure we've got partners that can play as a part of that broader ecosystem and contribute to how we believe we need to be integrating all these solutions. So integration's key, and that's really what I'm going to talk you through this morning. All right, so this has largely been hit. We know expectations are changing, right? Customers are shifting from voice to digital, although not as fast as you might expect. And I think if your company's anything like ours, we don't always do a great job of meeting customers in the right place. So there is a shift, but we think we can really accelerate that if we do a better job meeting customers. They're definitely choosing when available, those written channels. And as I said, they're a lot more happy when they get served in that digital channel of choice. So my team, before I kind of jump in, I've got responsibility for tools, technology, and quality across the residential business. My team's responsible for what you see on the screen. The piece I'm really going to deep dive into is our responsibility for desktop tools, and so basically what the agents use in the contact centers. So as we think about that, and we think about this transition from voice to digital and improving the digital experience, we knew that our tools were not effective. We also recognized that our tools were largely all designed in a voice-centric world, right? Probably not unlike yours. And even in the digital channels where you might be using an eGain or some social media platform, those tools were originally designed largely with that channel in mind as well, right? So for us, we took a big step back and said, all right, clean slate, how do we best support that agent of the future? So we did a lot of research. We spent a lot of time with agents. We spent a lot of time with our internal customers within the business, learned a ton about what really works, what doesn't work, I will tell you going in that there was a lot of discussion about a lot of complicated feature and functionality work that folks thought we needed to do in the tools. And what we found was, particularly with the agents, is that they really just wanted us to connect things better. And you heard Ashu talk about this, right? Just connect the dots. Help me to see that the fact that that customer talked to somebody in the voice channel yesterday, 20 minutes ago. They may be chatting with me now, and I may have a great history of different chat and SMS conversations with that customer, but help me to see the voice piece as well, et cetera, right? So connecting those dots, huge piece that came out of that. The other thing we've done is we've spent a lot of time with different companies, just a selection of companies that we learned quite a bit from on the screen here, trying to get a sense for what other folks had figured out, what are the challenges they're struggling with. And one of the things that we've learned is, and I'm guessing many of you have, kind of are in the same boat, there are not a lot of businesses that have really solved for all of this and integrated it well. And so I'm going to take you through sort of how we see all of this playing out at Comcast. So the story I want to tell, and I'm guessing being in Chicago and in a room this size, many of you are customers, and thank you for your business. We appreciate it. So this story may resonate, and we're all probably consumers of products like ours. But I want to use this to kind of help illustrate how we see things fitting together. So this story is about a customer named Sasha. She's on her way home. She notices this down cable line. It's probably a little bit difficult to see. It's lying in the road, right? She snaps a picture. She pulls up her Xfinity app, right? She sees that there's no wait for a chat agent, so she selects that. The Xfinity Assistant, or the virtual assistant that sits in front of that chat agent, lets the agent know that she's got a down line problem. So again, passing that context through to the agent. And then there's a conversation with an agent named Joel, right? And so, of course, we've got it all scripted perfectly. It doesn't always work out exactly as you plan, but Joel greets her, acknowledges that he recognizes she's got a down line issue, makes sure that she's okay, reinforces that we're going to get out there quickly. She says she's got a picture. Can I send it over to you? Great, right? She sends the picture. Quick interaction. So here's Joel, and here's Joel in front of his desktop. And you heard Ashu talk about the average agent has 7 or 8 different tools, maybe many more, right? I think we were as high as 14 at one point. What you see in front of you on the left is illustrative. On the right is our desktop UI, right? So on the right-hand side is everything that Joel needs to know about Sasha, the customer he's engaged with at the time. On the left-hand side is basically that interaction manager, right? Very similar to what your eGain screen would look like if you're managing multiple conversations at the same time. The difference is that this communication manager on the left-hand screen is truly omni-channel and sees and tracks across all channels, voice included. All right? So Joel takes the image, attaches it to a ticket, can see that a truck is available, right? Obviously, a line down is serious. That would be a same-day sort of thing, right? Confirms how quickly we can get somebody out to Sasha, schedules it, and goes back to Sasha, right? Thanks for waiting. Got a technician on the way. Also, I've noticed, again, context being passed, that you've got connection issues. Could be that down line in your neighborhood, maybe not, right? So we'll check in after the tech visit to make sure that that was the issue, and if not, we'll help you out, right? She says, thanks, I've got to run to work. Anything else I can help you with? Nope, great. Sasha's good, okay? Now, what I just said sounds simple, but I'm guessing many of you in the room know that that is not necessarily easy to do when you have a legacy environment of multiple different applications purchased at different times by different people with different goals in mind. Potentially in silos if you go back a number of years. And again, that's why that integration is so key, and I'll talk about how we're doing that. So here's Joel, right? This has gone on. Now he gets a Facebook message notification, right? Again, because he is truly able to interact across multiple channels. Swaps to that new conversation. That pulls up Richard, another customer, all right? So Richard's not happy. His internet's down. He needs it most. He's going to do a Skype with his daughter, right? Don't want to let the ladies down in your family. Important tip. So Joel throws on a headset, right? He can jump right into a voice conversation, no problem. He calls Richard. The system sees that he's on a call, so it's not going to pass any text messages or chat sessions to him. They spend some time troubleshooting. They get the modem reconfigured. It's an issue that Joel can help Richard with, and so they get it all squared away. He's up and running. Now, after the call with Richard, Joel sees that the down line has been taken care of by the technician he sent out to Sasha earlier. The Xfinity Assistant, or our virtual assistant, it follows up with Sasha, not Joel, right? The way that we view the assistant is really, it's a super agent, right? It should be able to interact with a customer just like an agent does. It should also sit on the desktop, and you heard that mentioned several times this morning, to help the agent, many of whom may have only been here 6 to 9 months, right? So the Xfinity Assistant follows up. Joel moves on to his new engagement, and we'll let Sasha know if more help's needed. The Xfinity Assistant, rather, will let Joel know if Sasha needs more help. A few hours later, Joel gets a notification through Facebook Messenger from Richard, right? So this is Richard calling the IVR, again, needs to be connected into this ecosystem, recognizes Richard, knows that Richard talked to Joel, knows Joel is still working, offers Richard to be connected to Joel, right? All of that can happen. Technically, it's not really that complicated. Joel jumps in, how's the modem? Richard, it's great. I have another question. Could you help me out, right? And that transitions into something else. So again, a relatively simple illustration, but not so simple to execute against, requires a high level of integration across different solutions. This is probably the most important slide in what I'm going to share because it illustrates how all of these piece parts need to fit together, and it reinforces something that Ashu touched on in the upper left-hand corner with interaction standards. Ashu talked about the IVR. So most of us have IVRs that were built years ago and have been highly integrated into your voice platform. You can generally trace what happens to a customer across that environment very well, right? That starts to break down for many of us when you get into these digital channels. And so the key here is we've established standards that our virtual assistant team has to use, that our help and support team for the online content and support has to use, that we use in the IVR, that we use with our desktop user interface. Those standards ensure that all of that data that is sitting under all of this is able to be parsed and reported on consistently. So you need to know if your virtual assistant is resolving at a same or better rate as your IVR, right? You need to know if the NPS from a virtual assistant interaction is better or worse than the same interaction in the IVR, et cetera. You can't do that unless you've got standards underlying all of these different platforms, and even if those teams roll up to different folks in the organization, they've got to all be playing by those standards. So that's something foundational that we've implemented. Then you've got all the customer-facing channels. We've touched on that. The next piece is how are you going to route all of your interactions, right? Most of you probably have a pretty elaborate routing scheme, some sort of solution in the voice space. We did as well. Not so in the digital channel. Today, most of our digital channel routing actually requires us to work through eGain to make those changes, right? So different in the digital channel versus the voice channel. And so what we've done is we've essentially expanded that voice channel routing machine to cover all of the digital channels, integrating solutions like eGain and our other customer-facing applications, and enabling us to control routing in one place. So again, consistency in reporting, that folks that run the business, they will manage that the same way. And the reason that's so important is, if you think about the chat channel, in our case, highly complex routing schemes in voice to make sure we get the customer to the right person whenever possible If you don't have that same level of flexibility in the digital channel, you don't have a consistent experience, which doesn't always show up to a customer, but oftentimes it does. And it doesn't make sense, right? So routing layer, super critical. On top of that, the platforms, right? So in our case, messaging platform, social media platform, voice platform. Depending on the size and complexity of your business, you may have multiple different platforms that play in the same space, but that all sits on top of that routing platform. So again, that customer gets passed through in a consistent way and then goes to the platform that we need in order to serve them in the channel that they've chosen. And then sitting on top of that is the user interface. That's really the last piece. So what's needed to accomplish the vision? I want to just touch on a few things that we've learned as we've gone through this process. One is that integrated communications experience that I talked about, that left-hand screen. Two is a unified journey. That's those interaction standards to make sure that you can track that customer regardless of channel, and that also are they in an open interaction? Did the last interaction actually solve the problem? Was it completed, right? Information that needs to be passed through. An asynchronous operational model. So this is pretty simple, right? But obviously you've got to be able to support multiple simultaneous and asynchronous conversations from a desktop perspective. Significant productivity improvements if you do this right. And then that virtual assistant integration is super critical. And you heard both Ian and Ashu talk about virtual assistants sitting on the desktop, being that super agent, helping the human agent guide them through, presenting additional context, et cetera. And we absolutely believe that's a key part of all of this. The other thing that we really, I don't think, would have expected to be such a big deal at the beginning of this process that we found to be very critical is essentially window and session management, right? If you sit with your agents, you're probably going to find that they have a lot of different windows open at the same time, in addition to the multiple applications. So you might think you have a unified desktop with one user interface. But if you have what we call toolkits, if you've got other things agents might click on and need to do that actually aren't embedded in that user interface, now you've got multiple windows open. You could have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more windows open for one individual customer. And do you do a good job of collating those together so that if Richard is talking to Joel, Joel actually has all of the windows related to Richard synced up and together and labeled correctly? Or does he have to manage his desktop and know where to go click? And that's really what we found, right? Agents are kind of figuring it out, but it wasn't done well. So you've got that whole piece of it, right? You've also got performance improvement in performance in general. So are your desktops or whatever you're using to power all of this, is it all scaled, sized? Do you have enough memory, processing power to support 3, 4, 5 interactions at the same time? We found that we really didn't, and that there was a point at which productivity was being held back by machines, not somebody's actual ability to support those customers, right? And then saving and continuing transactions. So in our world, we do a lot of troubleshooting, right? And if you imagine an asynchronous environment, if you've got 3 customers, and this is very real for a social media agent, for example, 3 customers you're interacting with, you're troubleshooting 3 separate problems. We have very detailed flows and a lot of automation built in behind this. Those conversations happen over a period of time. Well, what if your tool times out after X number of minutes, right? And then the agent has to go start over. So things like that you've got to make sure you're thinking about through the lens of a digital, asynchronous, much longer conversation. So that's kind of a quick run through how we're focusing on integration from a desktop perspective and some of the things specifically that we're working on to bring all of that to life. I want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits that we've seen. And my deck gets poured over by a bunch of folks, so all the fun numbers get stripped out. But I'll tell you that we have absolutely already seen benefits, and we're super bullish on what's to come. So one, the path forward has been highly informed by all of this time that we've spent really embedded with our agents that are already playing in this digital space. And that has made a tremendous difference in the solutions that we're designing and the work that we're doing already. So even if you think you understand what the agent experience is like in your business, I would highly encourage a lot of time to be spent there before you go too much further. Increases in written volume. So as we've started to focus on making tools function better and that environment, in improving that environment for agents, we're seeing more customers migrating to and staying in the written channels. We've set some really aggressive targets for shift from voice to written, but absolutely getting the tool set right and making all of this work better is contributing to increases in written volume, and in particular, SMS and messaging volume over chat. The other thing is that it's really helped us in the quality space recognize that you have to focus on quality in the written channel specifically, and if you're big enough, I would say even have a resource or resources that are dedicated to managing quality in this channel. What you expect can be the same, and it is in our case, but how you measure it, how you coach can be very different. And in fact, it's even easier sometimes to coach to a written interaction, but again, even though we went into this with a tools lens and an overall CX improvement lens, we really found a lot of insights that have helped to manage quality in the written space. And then last, defining success measures. So, this changes how you measure performance at the agent level, at the supervisor and coach level, as volume shifts from voice to written. It's a very different dynamic. The old measurements of productivity and effectiveness don't necessarily work. And so again, just like we've talked about the importance of integrating the channels, you really have to think about when we do that, what does that mean? How do you measure Joel's performance, right? In an environment where he's in and out of different channels, potentially on voice and written simultaneously, right? It's more complicated. And so really, this whole process has helped us and the operations folks to define success measures more effectively. So at the end of the day, I'll end where I started. We are seeing a 20 to 30 point improvement in transactional NPS on interactions that get shifted from voice to digital. If that's not a reason to figure out how to get this right, I don't know what is. So that's been huge and something that continues to drive us. The other piece is, and this gets back to the 84% of your agents being dissatisfied with your tools, employee NPS, which we also measure, has also seen significant improvements in the sites where we've piloted the early work and started to turn on some of these features and capabilities. So, a win there. As we go into this, we're probably about 12 months in, lower attrition, some of the other things that you might expect to see, we're absolutely seeing, and we're really just at the beginning of the process. So hopefully that gives you kind of a sense for the path that we're on, maybe triggers some questions. I'll be around throughout the day if anybody wants to hit me up. But again, as I started and shared, any of us who are customers of eGain are likely experiencing a lot of the same challenges and working on a lot of the same solutions, and I think there's just a lot of power in sharing, comparing notes. Unless you work for one of our immediate competitors, then don't bother asking. But for the rest of you, I'm more than happy to share. So like I said, hit me up if you catch me. Really, really super passionate about all of this. And last, I think, just to reinforce, the integration is so critical. Nobody's going to solve their problem in this space or satisfy, create a solution for the opportunity by buying a product from a company. It's all about figuring out how to connect those dots. If I was starting a business brand new and I could go to eGain or I could go to any other company that does this and say, I'll take it all, I'm going to keep it simple, that'd be awesome. But that's not the situation probably most of us, or maybe any of us are in. And so it really is about how you connect those different solutions in your ecosystem. And again, why for us, eGain's been an important part of how we connect those dots, because you need partners that are willing to ditch their UI and be the engine behind your UI, if that's the path you decide to go down, right? Just the same, you need them to deliver a killer UI if you don't want to play in that space and you don't have the resources to do that. And so that flexibility, I think, is really critical. And I think as you spend time next door looking at the different solutions and thinking about how you're going to solve these problems in your own business, I would just highly stress, think about how it all ties together, because for us, that's really proven to be the key to the successful path we're on. So thank you very much for the time. Enjoy the break and the rest of the day.